Good evening. This is a special meeting of the Athens Board of Zoning Appeals. This is also a virtual Zoom meeting. The time is 7:01 p.m. and the date is June 1st, 2021. At this time, I will call the meeting to order. The board consists of 5 members and 2 alternates. The alternates taking full part in the discussions and becoming a voting member in the absence of a member or when a member abstains for conflict of interest. Present tonight are members Ms. Lisa Carson, Mr. John Goodekins, Mr. Joe Kraus, Ms. Kay Towsley, and alternates. I have seen Mr. Aaron Thomas. Is Mr. Robert Dulac present?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, okay, very good. So we have all 5 members and the 2 alternates. I am John Golsey, the chair. Also present are zoning administrator, Mr. David Riggs, and secretary, Ms. Carrie Yake, as well as the government channel team. The board operates according to the following procedure. The chair will name and describe the case. The zoning administrator or secretary will state the basis of the objection and the applicable facts or conditions pertaining to the case. The appellant or their representative will give a reason why the appeal should be viewed favorably. Anyone wishing to speak in favor of the request will be heard. Anyone wishing to speak in general comment will be heard. Anyone wishing to speak in opposition will be heard. So those of you who are going to speak, we will give you a time. At that time, you can speak. If necessary, the appellant or their representative will offer concluding summary or rebuttal remarks. Testimony from the floor shall be closed. The board will deliberate and render a decision. According to Athens City Code, Section 230703B, the board has power to grant variances from the strict application of the code, provided the variance will not be contrary to the public interest, the spirit of code is observed, public safety and welfare are secured, and substantial justice is done. According to Athens City Code Section 230710C, variances from the code shall not be granted unless the board makes a specific findings of fact based directly on the particular evidence presented to it, that the standards and conditions imposed in this title, if applicable, have been met by the applicant. And these are exceptional circumstances, practical difficulty and undue hardship, preservation of equal property rights, minimum variance, absence of detriment, and not being a general nature. And I will go and read each one of those in detail when we are going over the findings. Any person, a resident or officer, department or appointed body of the city of Athens aggrieved by a decision of the board may petition the Athens County Court of Common Pleas concerning the illegality of the decision. Such petition must be filed within 30 days after the mailing of the decision of the board to the applicant. And before I go actually talk about the case, the board is required to take testimony under oath. Would anyone wishing to speak concerning any item on the agenda, please confirm. Do you swear or affirm that any testimony you will present to the board will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? At this point, you may unmute yourself and state yes or no.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone who will be speaking tonight, aside from the code office and the board members, we are assuming that they are under oath. Our special meeting tonight is with respect to the property at 280 East State Street. We held a hearing for this case on May 11th, but unfortunately the link for the public participation was not functional. So this is basically a new hearing. On May 12th, the day after the first meeting, I asked the law director if the meeting complied with Ohio's Open Meeting Act. And she stated that if challenged, a court would invalidate the decision of the BZA. The BZA meeting did not comply with the Ohio Revised Code, section 121.22. And so a special meeting should be held and interested parties notified along with the notices required by the Athens City Code. I then asked for a legal opinion from our law director, and she provided, and the details and the entire opinion is posted on the website. So if you have any questions, you can refer to that. So let's go to Mr. David Riggs and find out if there is any updates, anything that you would like to add.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, this is still a request for a variance from ACC 231001 for multiple variances based on the proposed use.
Any questions for the code office?
John, I do have one question. There was some reference in one of the letters that came to us about a possible AEP easement that might be sought. Can Mr. Riggs or someone speak to that perhaps?
So I could respond to that. There may be additional easements that are required or requested for this, and that would not affect what we're looking at tonight.
Just a follow-up question. Would it be relevant if it's a concern of some of the abutting residences?
So this is actually a separate section for use of the public right-of-way for access into the site for additional public utilities. I think that they would actually be separate from this discussion.
Okay, thank you. Before I go on, I'd like to ask Ryan, if you could say, do we have any member of the public present? We want to make sure that they have access.
Yes, John, there's at least 8 people here with us in the public right now.
Okay, great. And by the way, this is a special meeting of the Athens Board of Zoning Appeal. We only have one case, and the case is number 2104V. The property is at 280 East State Street. Zone is B1, and Mr. Trent DeBruin is the appellant and Montel LCC the owner. Appellant is requesting a variance from ACC 231001 to allow a front setback of 8 feet where 25 feet is required, a rear setback of 5 feet where 30 feet is required, right side setback of 4 inches where 8 feet is required, a structure coverage of 40% where 30% is the maximum, total lot coverage of 91% where 60% is the maximum, and a variance from ACC 230401 to allow 8 units where 1 unit is permitted. Proposed work would provide 3 residential units and 1 business space on the first floor. The second floor would provide 5 residential units. Did I say everything correctly, Mr. Riggs?
Yes, you did, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I just changed the 30% is required to the maximum allowed because you don't have to have, you could have less than 30%. Okay, unless if there's any questions from the board members, I'm going to go to the appellant and
real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
How many of those units are ADA 6 compliant? Hmm, anyone know?
That would be, 3 of them would be compliant.
Okay.
And just to refresh my memory, 8 units means what, 8 people? If somebody would like to answer that.
They're more than likely going to be 2-bedroom units,
So it would be like 16 people?
potentially.
Okay. All right, thank you. So would you like to go ahead and officially state your name and your address for the records and your case?
Thank you. My name is Kurt Montel. I am a resident on the near east side of Athens at 74 Elmwood Place. On behalf of my family's small business, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to consider our proposal again for the development of 280 East State Street. Our goal is to add value to the community by developing a currently vacant near a rear commercial unit. By maintaining the same building footprint and adding a second floor to the rear of the building, we can provide 8 residential units and 2 commercial units. The variance we're asking for is nothing more than rights that neighboring properties enjoy. At 282 and 284 East State Street, Mr. Larry Young has a mixed-use development with residential units on the first and second floors and also commercial spaces on the first floor. This property mirrors the same use that we are proposing. Also at the corner of Madison and East State, Diversified Properties has multiple residential units surrounded by an R1 neighborhood. Why do we need a variance? We have no choice but to ask for a dimensional and use variance. The existing building space is too large to be a viable commercial rental. There is very little need for over 4,000 square feet in the very restrictive B1 zone. Strict conformity to the building setbacks renders conformity necessarily burdensome and impractical. We would have to demolish this iconic building to meet the setback requirements. If I could please share my screen. Let's see here. Give me 1 second if you don't mind. Can you see my screen?
Not yet.
How about now?
There you go.
Thank you. There are an inordinate number of commercial vacancies on East State Street corridor. Listed are over 30 commercial vacancies on East State Street alone. I'm most certain we could actually add more to this list if we were given some time. Furthermore, strict compliance of the code prevents improvement of the property, which is consistent with other properties in the area and causes a practical difficulty in preserving a landmark building. Also, the pandemic has created an environment that lessens the demand for large commercial spaces as employees work from home. This undue hardship has been thrown upon us at no fault of our own. Finally, the creation of additional commercial storefronts is inhibited by the existing topography and site layout. The parking lot is at a significantly higher elevation than the finished floor, inhibiting accessible development on this side. In addition, adding storefronts along the parking lot then inordinately reduces the amount available of parking spaces. What are we proposing? We're proposing 8 total loft-style apartments intended to serve the young professional and retiree population. The 3 apartments on the first floor are all ADA accessible, age-friendly units. This maintains 2 first-floor commercial spaces. Details of this proposed development fall in line with many of the recommendations from the 2012 Low-Income Housing Needs Analysis, including non-student oriented housing, close to transit stops, nearby to community service providers, infill housing within the community fabric, and of course, ADA accessible housing. The front of the building and the exterior Art Deco facade will not change. Our goal is to preserve and breathe life back into this landmark building. The wall height of the rear of the building will only increase by 5 to 6 feet. In an effort to reach out to the community and ease any concerns, I posted the complete application on the Near East Side Facebook page. We've also reached out to many of the neighbors to create an open and constructive dialogue. I've met with a few property owners, including Mr. Aaron Leatherwood, who's an adjoining property owner who reached out to me. And we plan actually to implement his concerns with our future building application, which includes minimizing the balcony size to reduce the occupancy, add a green space along East State Street to be able to plant and create a privacy screening, and also to review the parking needs of the community. Thankfully, we have plenty of parking for this project. In reference to Kay's question that she just asked, there was a lady to the rear of the property who actually reached out to us in regards to the concern for AEP easements. And I met with her personally. Her name is Laura. And there was a misunderstanding. She was of the understanding that she would have to move her fence and her parking area in the rear of her lot. And the AEP representative didn't explain well in regards to the fact that actually what he was asking was for an aerial, an above ground right of way. And through our discussions that eased her concerns. I'm not sure if she's attending today, but that conversation was very positive. In reference to quality of construction, I can offer pictures of previous projects. The first here is 19 South Congress. This is a picture before we started construction on this particular building. The second picture, which I hope you can see now, is the finished product.
Looks the same.
Let me see here, technology. Let's go here. Are you able to see this? Thank you.
Yes.
This is the finished product of 19 South Congress Street. Another project that we've done in the, actually on this side of the neighborhood is 12 and 16 South Shannon. "12 and 16 South Shannon, we purchased this property at a sheriff's sale. And at this particular location, we demolished 2 structures, one of which was actually condemned. And we built 2 identical houses. Here is a sample of one of the houses. You can see the other house adjacent to the right there. Appreciate you allowing me an opportunity to speak. this point in time, I'd like to hand it over to our architect, Trent DeBruin. Thank you.
So I too would like to share my screen.
Please state your name and the address for the record.
Of course. My name is Trent DeBruin. I'm an architect with VSWC Architects in Athens, Ohio. I live at 12092 Sweat Hollow Road in Millfield, Ohio.
Thank you.
So I should be sharing my screen now. Is that correct? Wait a second. There we go. I should be sharing my screen now.
We see
Is
it.
that correct? You do. Great. Thank you. So the B1 zone, as per the latest City of Athens zoning map, is this area here in blue. And as you can tell, the area surrounding it is the R1 zoning area. The area in detail, the blue that I recently showed you is now outlined here in pink. What we looked at was, one of the concerns was that this is a rental property, and we looked at the rentals that are available, the listing of rentals, and every one of these items that are in blue are currently rental units. So specifically here in the B1,
Trent, you need to reshare your screen. They can't see what you're speaking of. You have to go back through the same process.
I see it.
Thank you. Is that better? Okay, so as I stated, we've got on the City of Athens rental guide and found all the housing, just specifically in this area that is currently being rented. And all of these houses that are in with blue lettering is how we designated a rental unit. So you can see the area outlined here is the B1 zoned area for the City of Athens zoning map. And there are several rental units currently in the B1 zone. We looked at if any of these were more than one family housing. And as was brought up in the original meeting, above Kindred Market, there are several units, more than one. I believe someone said there was 12, I read in one of the letters. There are a couple rental units over here at the corner of Madison and State Street that those two have more than a single family living unit. Something else we thought we would look at would be which of these properties on a new share, which of these properties on can you see my B1 zone adjoining R1 now?
Yes.
So we thought we would look at and see which one of these properties actually meets a B1 zone. And interestingly enough, of all of the units that I just previously showed you in the B1, the 270 East State Street would meet all of the requirements. All of the other items, all the other properties have lot size issues, lot width, setbacks, lot size, et cetera, et cetera. But however, 270 does meet all of the requirements. And when we did this, if these were single family, if these were houses, we took them into consideration that they would have to be zoned in the R1 zoning. When we were designing the schematic layout of a potential build out here, the idea was to create privacy for young professionals, for the elderly. And so the intent was to intentionally create these balconies so they would be a distance away from their neighbors to help give them the effect that they're, that it is their own. And while they are in a potential space where there's apartments, that they would have a sense of their own space by having the balconies separated where we could make that happen. So with this current plan, the intent would be the front here that would be facing State Street would definitely remain a business with the Art Deco design that Kurt mentioned earlier. And then this side over here, close to the parking lot, that opens up quite nicely. That would be of interest to a potential office or business. Where we felt this one over here was due to the proximity of the neighboring area, that this is a much more difficult area. It wouldn't have as much openness or curb appeal as these two office areas on this side. As we were looking at this, Kurt mentioned the size of this space. I spoke with some realtors in the area, and the most common size or area square footage of a business is around 1,200 square feet. We did some research on the Athens comprehensive plan. And I know we spoke last time, there was a question about the lack of quality housing, but someone from the university, I would presume, was the one that noted that Ohio University experiences difficulty attracting faculty and staff to Athens because of lack of quality housing options. In addition, the lack of rental and owner-occupied housing choices for professionals is a reason cited by business owners for locating elsewhere. As Kurt mentioned, the idea here is to provide housing that is within walking distance. We see this as a sustainable project, retaining an iconic building, providing more dense housing in an area that can accommodate dense housing with a large parking lot that is currently underutilized. Certainly would be in walking distance to a nice grocery store and other amenities, very close to State Street. There's certain other items in Athens that they want it to be more of a pedestrian city. And so putting more people closer to such amenities would certainly allow those to come to fruition. There's several other items in the Athens comprehensive plan. One of them was about disabilities and providing housing for disabilities, and certainly having ADA accessible areas here. Someone with disabilities, whether it be for they're wheelchair bound, or they have to use a walker, or they're elderly, or not that elderly, or is disabled or have disabilities, but that they could have amenities where they could be self-sufficient and go out and get items that they need on their own accord without having to ask someone, and give them more of a sense of independence. Not a sense of independence, a true independence, when they can go out on their own and gather their own food without having to get on a local transit or do something like that. So several very positive aspects of this project when Kurt and I was really talking about the potential for this site. All very quality ideas we thought that really went hand in hand with the Athens comprehensive plan. And I think Kurt's really a spearhead in making this comprehensive plan, and someone who wants to truly invest in their community and make their community a better place, and not just for the people that can walk upright and get around town, but for other people, and to help other businesses grow, and to help retain some of those young professionals who really want to stay in Athens. And if they have some good housing, they can potentially stay in Athens and work for a high university, or even better yet, work for a business that's starting up here in Athens. Because that's, as you read through the comprehensive plan, which I'm sure you all are very well aware of, that housing is one of the reasons they don't stay. And as a parent with 3 children in their 20s, we're very fortunate. They didn't have a lot of student debt, but certainly student debt is a very large factor. And having some type of housing that would be close to their home, and maybe they don't need to buy a car or something like that, might just be the thing that helps them to get on their own feet and to really be a viable asset to the community in which they grew up in. So with that, I could go through several other items in the Athens comprehensive plan. Some that talks about the city's zoning may need to be thoughtfully adapted to ensure we provide flexibility to developers to address these needs. There's stairs are an issue in Athens, the various hillsides, and so it's senior housing is brought up. These are all items that Kurt wants to address with this project, and we are certainly supportive of that, and want to help make it a positive aspect for the community.
Well, thank you. I have 3 comments, general comments. First of all, we hear each case based on its own merits. We don't say just because this neighborhood, this neighbor, or this other property has residential that we have to give you the variance. So each case we hear them independent of each other. So we are not going to say all the cases that you showed, they may have been grandfathered, they may have some other circumstances, situation. So we're going to be looking at this case by itself. And second, we do not consider a financial gain or loss of the owners. So this is something we have never considered. And as for the pandemic, I hope it's only temporary, because the variance goes forever. It goes for a life of the property. So that is not the case. What I'd like to hear more from you is that we are bound to only use the 6 criteria that we have. We have to find the special circumstances that applies only to this property at this vicinity and this zone that makes it impossible for the use of the property, or what is the difficulties, the hardship in there, and so forth. Those are the ones that we need to ultimately make our decision based on. So if you want to add anything in that regard, that would be great. And then, of course, my colleagues will have some questions for you.
Sure thing. I think we can rehash a lot of the points that have just spoken to in regards to the challenges of this particular property. One is the size, the square footage. It's an obvious challenge. The usability of the space is extremely limited, and actually the B1 zone itself, it limits us even more. The B1 zone, if you read through it, is extremely strict and hard to fill and provide a use for. Obviously, in regards to when we're talking about dimensional variances, this is an existing property that currently is in non-conformance. That we can't change that without demolishing this building. So if the dimensional variance is a concern, we would have to actually remove the building and resituate a new a structure, which would probably look more like what we would see as a strip mall for this particular application.
Okay, I have one question and then I will let the members talk. What was the last use of this property?
The last use of this property was Career Connections.
Okay. Is a similar business could go in there and be used as it was as a Larry Conrad's old real estate agency, or as the
No, there's a no, that it was Career Connections in the rear building, and my understanding is they actually moved to a structure that was a smaller footprint because of the office space was not needed. To my knowledge, there is only one recruitment employment company within the region.
so as is.
The real estate office is actually in the front of the building, and that is to remain.
So you're saying that as is, this property cannot be used for any other business or or anything else, right?
Not without making dramatic changes. And that's when I was speaking in regards to our struggles with the actual, the site topography and with the site layout, the way the building is built today. The existing topography is a challenge. Currently, the parking lot is actually at a higher elevation than what the actual finished floor is on the first floor. And the reasoning of that is we have a lot of excessive drainage that comes off of Patton Street. And unfortunately, it ends up in our parking lot. So what the previous property owner did was had some new concrete poured, which you can see, to help the drainage issue that comes off of the city streets. And in doing so, there is an existing, I think it's approximately, it's a minimum of 16 inches, if I remember correctly, variance in elevation. So that really limits what we can do on what I would call an accessible side of the building. Otherwise, if we're not provided this variance, and you say, hey, you have to have commercial space here no matter what, which is basically what this board would tell us. What you're telling me then is that we're going to have to create some form of commercial access to the rear of this structure at an alleyway. And I'm not really sure that the community, well, personally, I don't think that's one, I don't think it's realistic. I don't, from a use point of view. Number two, I do not believe that commercial use from access of an alley that the general public, specifically the Patton Street residents, are going to want to have people that they have no idea who they are accessing this facility. I just find that to be a very unrealistic use of the property.
All right, thank you. Any questions from the board members?
Oh, yeah, I have a question. Is that windowless in the back there right now? No windows? Or just the...
Currently, good question. Actually, the first floor currently does have some windows to the rear of the alley. So there are windows, and there are actually two doors that egress more of emergency exits currently as they're set up. That's actually what they are, with the main entrance coming off the front of East State.
Okay. I had another question. What's the shed back there? Is that for garbage in the parking lot?
That's a garage. It's currently used as a storage building.
Okay. Are you guys going to get rid of that?
We don't have any intention of doing so, no.
I have a question regarding traffic in the alley. Is that likely to increase with your project?
That's a great question. My answer would be no. The traffic access is primarily off of East State Street. And I don't know if you're used to viewing the property, have access to property yourself. The natural progression is from East State Street. You come onto the side alley between us and what I call the Village Bakery. and you would immediately turn right into the parking lot. One of the concerns that Laura brought up with me, which I think she had addressed her concerns or sent a question, was concerns with the alley use. And a lot of those are more of maintenance use. There's actually a lot of ice in that alleyway that goes back to the drainage issue we have off the hillside that all of the neighboring properties, including ours, contend with. That's just more of a maintenance issue in that regard.
Any other questions from members or even alternates? If you have a question, you can just, you can discuss them.
I'd like to say something, and the question, I would have a question be one part of what I would like to say. Can I do that now or should I do it later?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, so I appreciate the frustration experienced by developers who feel hampered by the limitations of the code. And I understand we've received a lot of letters from people that are very supportive of the Montal company, of the Montals personally, of the kinds of projects they do, very excited about this project. They're excited about adding more housing in an area where people who would be able to go to the grocery store and take the bus and so on. Excited about ADA compliant housing, of which there's apparently a great shortage in this town. I'm sympathetic to all of that, but I have to repeat what I said the last time we considered this, that those are actually not things that we as a zoning board are even really permitted to consider. So we have to, in granting a variance, we have to consider specific aspects of the property. And I'll read from the code. It says prevailing conditions that create undue difficulty or hardship are strictly limited to those exceptional situations where, owing to special conditions of the property in question, for example, exceptional narrowness, shallowness, unusual shape on the effective date of the zoning code, or exceptional topographic conditions, or owing to extraordinary situations or conditions on the property immediately adjoining the piece of property in question. In such cases, the literal enforcement of the requirements of the zoning code would involve undue difficulty or hardship. As far as I can see, although Mr. Montal brought up an interesting point about the topography, I would just like to state firmly my own feeling that if we're talking about the difficulty of filling commercial spaces in the city, that may be a general problem. And if we're talking about a lack of housing or a lack of lower cost housing or ADA housing, those are all serious and important problems. But I would argue that they are of a general nature if the code is somehow hampering the development of properties of this kind. And it seems to me that there would, if there is such a general problem, there should be a legislative approach to it rather than coming to the Board of Zoning Appeals. But I will just say, so I'm saying all that in reference to the letters and to the enthusiasm. My vote last time had nothing to do with the value of this project. It is obviously a great project. My question is whether, as the zoning board, we can appropriately say, well, all these arguments people are making about needing more units and this, that, and the other are really relevant to problems attached to the property. But Mr. Montal, you did bring up this question of the topography and the drainage from Patton Street and so on. I mean, I personally am not comfortable considering all these other elements because I don't think that they are under the authority of the Zoning Board of Appeals. But if you could, and this is just me, maybe other people think this is crazy, I would be much more interested in entertaining a proposal for a variance based on something very specific about the difficulty of developing that property.
I understand your concerns. we feel like we're pigeonholed. You know, we're trying to develop a property that we don't feel as if we have any opportunity but to come to the variance board. We feel as if this is our last resort. And that's why we are here for the second time. In regards to, you know, I can reiterate the topographic issues that we have. The water, I don't know if you can visually view the property. The water comes off of the Patton Street, what I'm going to call hill, kind of behind the Kindred Market, and it all comes down this alleyway. And either it comes directly down to East State Street, or it splits this alleyway that Kay was kind of speaking of, that Laura, an adjoining property owner, had mentioned. It comes down this alleyway, and it comes barreling down this alleyway. And our biggest issue is we cannot change the grading to make any more of this property accessible than what it is on that particular side because of the water issue, and it's significant. I don't know how else to state that, you know, I'm not an attorney, and I'm just here as a property owner trying to provide the biggest value, not only to my company, but also to the neighborhood. And I understand that, you know, this board doesn't resonate with that concern at all. But what I'll tell you, you know, in my point of view, when we talk about a general nature, you know, when we're talking about a use or of general nature within this B1 zone, I do not understand how this board can ignore that there are two existing non-conforming properties that would make our application of a general nature. What I'm saying is multi-use properties within the B1 zone. You know, you have multiple tenants and commercial mixed development, however you would like to say that. I don't understand how they can resonate. Now, you know, we don't need to get into that conversation. Everyone has personal views on how this needs to be delivered. But what I would extend is, from our point of view, we're asking for a use that, in my mind, conforms with our neighbors that are in the same business zone. Whether they were grandfathered or approved in another form, I don't know either, but I would simply ask for that same usage.
Well, I guess I would just add to that, so that is not among our findings. You know, we look at other properties, because in fact, it does matter if they've been grandfathered. So that means if they're grandfathered, if they were then to pursue a different use, they would have to come before the board as well, right? Mm-hmm. The thing that I think, and I say this every now and then, and nothing ever happens as a result of it, but it seems to me that the letters in support they're basically saying that in these B1 areas, it should be possible to have a less restrictive, you know, in terms of number of units, a less restrictive control of that. That's the code, you know. It's because it's an R1 that's adjoining that it has to be less restrictive. I mean, more restrictive. The city council can change that. I mean, if everyone is on board with, we need more housing, we need more multiple units in these areas that are next to, you know, single family dwellings, et cetera, that's something that the town can take up and do something about. It's not really, in my opinion, not really something the Board of Zoning Appeals is meant to promote in any way, because our jurisdiction, if that's what it's called, is much narrower than that.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments by board members?
So preservation of equal property rights. So potentially Kindred Market has been there. It's my understanding Kindred Market has had rental units on the second floor for many, many years. So that sounds like that could potentially be grandfathered in, but the ones down at the corner of State and Madison, it's my understanding those are more than single family residents. So I guess it seems to me that would be preservation of equal property rights. If those properties in a B1 zone are allowed multifamily housing, I'm not sure why this one. I guess that's my understanding. Those properties do not have a business associated with them, and this what we're asking for here is that this property would still have at least two businesses still associated with it that that face the main corridor of this area.
I take your point, and sorry, may I go ahead and answer, John?
Sure.
I do take your point. It is true that a variance was granted to them, and I haven't revisited the case, and I don't know what the arguments were, but I would point out that it could also be argued that this is becoming of a general nature, right? That there are going to be more developers that are going to come forward and say, we're really not able to find commercial tenants for these buildings. We need to be able to put residences in there. And that's something that I think City Council should then change the code to make it more flexible and allow that. So I would argue that if you do point at other properties that have the ability that you're looking to have, then it does start to look like it is of a general nature, and something needs to be done about it. Something more than us granting variance after variance to people. The code can be changed to accommodate these housing needs.
So what is the equal property rights then? The specific findings of fact for equal property rights. How is that defined then? If the people down the street have those rights, but yet this particular client here cannot enjoy the same rights, then isn't there a problem with equal property rights?
Again, those rights were either grandfathered, they are using it in the past, or as Ms. Carson said, there would be circumstances that we don't know at this point, why they have or they have not. So we don't want to give any more privilege to one property. And by the way, if those other properties are grandfathered, they want to have a renovation like you are doing and change the use of the business or add or bring more residential, then they would have the same problem. They have to come back to us. So it's not that they may be enjoying more privilege because of the grandfather status, but if they want to, make any changes, by the way, you have some privileges with the setbacks. Okay, your property does not conform to the setbacks because you have a privilege for using, and that's because it's grandfathered. But anytime a property is going to be renovated or change the use, then we have to look at it and make sure that we satisfy those 6 criteria. I don't know if I answer your question or not, but again, basically, what is being grandfathered, it stays as is. But if they ask for any changes, they would be in the same situation as you are.
Yeah, in fact, one of the drawings I did not show, which I could show, is the number of properties that don't meet the setback in this area, but I can certainly share that with you.
I'm sure there are some. I'm not arguing with you, but tonight we are hearing this case.
But I don't think I'm arguing with you either. I'm just saying, I'm just presenting the information that we have. And of course, this is an error. It may not be perfect, but the dark red line is the setback in this area. And right here is Mr. Montel's property, and you can see the B1 zone in this area, and you can see the houses across the street, which is all R1, which is
it's
all.
It's not coming up, or I don't see it.
Yeah, I don't see it, Trent.
Well, darn it. All right, now I'm sharing my screen. So here's Kurt Montel's property here, and the dark red line is the setback for an R1 zone. I understand it's an arrow. It may not be perfect, but in a general nature, I think you can see that there certainly are properties that, that are not within the setback zoning. Bulk control.
That would necessarily be the case because most of those properties were built before the code was written, right?
And has no bearing on this, on this matter either.
Okay.
Can I say something? So we're not, I still see the equal property rights as a big sticking point. As a business person, a guy that's 2 houses away from you has the same thing, and you cannot, we're going to tell him he cannot do that. And it's just it's a tough point. Can anyone give me, anything around that?
Well, again, that's what the law is. That's what we are discussing. We're not getting into the emotional aspects of it, but yes, obviously.
No, I mean, not getting
Sure.
emotional. It's just it's the fact that there's a building that's 2 houses away and has apartments above it. And we're going to tell Mr. Montel that he can't develop his the same way.
We are not discussing other properties. We are just going to concentrate on this property, and we are going to go with the 6 criteria that we have.
Okay.
From my personal point of view, when I read in the code section 23.07.08, and I scroll down to G, and we're talking about, this references application and standards for variances. And everyone can interpret this how they like, but simply reading the code, the granting of the variance requested will not confer on the applicant any special privilege that is denied by this regulation to other lands, structures, or buildings in the same zone. And when I read that in a literal sense, it does not speak of grandfathering. It does not speak of separate variances, etc. It basically speaks to what I interpret as equal rights. And I would just ask kindly that the board would please consider that.
All right, thank you. So unless there's any question, we're going to go to ask the audience. And by the way, I have in here 8 letters, possibly 9 for the variance. We have 2 or 3 letters that are kind of a concern, and the concern is not really with respect to the properties, mostly about the procedure of the board and its conduct, and then a couple opposition. We're going to read the letters after we hear from the audience. So please raise your hand if you have on your screen, if you have a hand, and then Ryan is going to let you in and unmute yourself and speak your case. And also, if you are hearing that somebody else has already mentioned something, has made a point, we don't need to repeat the same thing. So if you have something new to add, please do so, just for the sake of time. Thank you.
Okay, John, Noah Tremblay is raising his hand. I'm going to go ahead and let him in if that's okay.
Sure.
All right, I'm allowing Noah to speak. He'll have to unmute himself.
And when you come in, please state your name and your address, and even mention if you have sent a letter, so we don't need to read that letter again. By the way, we are now hearing from those who would like to speak for the variance, in favor of the variance. First, we are going to hear from those who want to speak on behalf of this proposal.
I've already permitted Noah the chance to speak here, so we'll see what he has to say. Sometimes it takes a minute for Noah to get his system working.
Noah Tremblay Enterprises. I live at 7055 North Blackburn Road. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Noah Tremblay. I'm the CEO of Noah Tremblay Enterprises. We're an Athens-based consulting firm. We offer a variety of services related to accessibility and inclusion of people living with disabilities. I have also been a resident for almost 14 years now, and I'm a very active member of our great community. I sit on various commissions, committees, and so on. That includes the Athens City Commission on Disabilities and the Athens Affordable Housing Commission. I'm here tonight with my colleague, Mr. Kurt Montel from Montel LLC, a real estate and property management company based here in Athens. I've been mostly working with his manager, Mr. Bob Prieb. When Mr. Prieb approached me about becoming a member of this project, I was thrilled on many levels. The first reason was finally seeing a local property management company trying to add handicap accessible and age-friendly units as one of the main elements of this project at 280 East State. Furthermore, I was impressed that they would be nicer. High-end units, even in this day and age. There is a lot of stigmatism still surrounded around people living with disabilities. I have been in Affordable Housing Commission meetings where we were talking about accessible housing, and sadly, a couple of my colleagues on that commission still associate accessible housing with low-income housing, which is just wrong. Accessible housing is a very hot topic with the Affordable Housing Commission. We've discussed a variety of different strategies to get accessible housing and age-friendly rental housing stock up in our community. That is a very rough task to do. At one point, we were talking about drafting an ordinance that would require property management companies and landlords that owns a certain number of rental units within the city to have a certain number of accessible units as well. One of the options that was discussed was 20%. We decided that we couldn't do that. This proposed project is a total number of 8 residential rental units, with 3 of them being handicap accessible and age-friendly units. That comes out to being 38% of the residential portion of this project are accessible units. That is impressive and forward-looking and really needed in our city. My colleague has also shared with me that this is the first opportunity that they have gotten to do a project like this one, and they will definitely look for other opportunities in the future to add accessible units to the rental stock of our community. I'm hoping this is a beginning of a trend that needs to happen in the city of Athens, and which the City of Athens 2040 comprehensive plan indicates as well. My colleagues have asked me to be on the design team as well. My firm specializes in universal design and smart home technology. We think of the whole person. That includes physical comfort as well as mental comfort. With that said, I already suggested to Mr. Prieb that we put security cameras in the common areas. These units would be 2-bedroom units with 1,100 square feet each. This sounds pretty spacious to me, especially considering I currently live in a 3-bedroom house that is just over 1,100 square feet. Speaking of my house, it was remodeled last year to be fully ADA accessible. Well, I can't even open my own kitchen cabinets with my assistance. My colleagues will have some of the nicest, most accessible units in town. As you can see, I support this project and urge the support of those that live on the Near East Side and in the city of Athens, and ask the board to vote to allow all variances so that this project may go forward.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else wishing to speak in favor of the request will be heard.
I'm seeing a hand raised here, Don Linder. I'm gonna go ahead and let him in.
Sure.
You have to unmute yourself, Don, and go ahead.
Okay, Don Linder. I live at 40 Strouds Run Road, Athens, Ohio. Unfortunately, I haven't listened to the whole meeting so far, but I did have a couple rudimentary questions of the board. It's been referred to that this is contiguous to a R1 zone. And I have been in front of the Zoning Board of Appeal a number of times in the past where precedent was set that if there's a thoroughfare between a zone, there is a separation and it is not deemed to be contiguous. So I don't know if part of the discussion or arguments here are whether this is contiguous to an R1 zone, but I think precedence has been set in the past that that's not the case, whether it be via an alley or via thoroughfare such as East State Street. Could I have maybe somebody from the Zoning Board of Appeal kind of clarify that for me, please?
Any board member or Mr. Riggs, please?
This is David Riggs with the Code Office. We don't have anything in our codified ordinances that says that a alley or a thoroughfare separates those zones. We consider that to be contiguous.
I'll comment on that. That has been disputed in the past, and I can specify some projects. One was the Merchants Bank on Stimson Avenue, which there's a 10-foot alley as well as a thoroughfare separating zones. And that was determined with the Board of Zoning Appeal relative to lack of argument that really, and I think what I hear you saying, Mr. Riggs, that there's nothing that's in the Zoning Board of Appeals that or the zoning code that does clarify that action. So I would say it's an unclarified point. And I believe that really the zone separation, if separated by a highway, by a thoroughfare, an alley, that's a public thoroughfare, it is not contiguous.
And I'm just looking at the code, they don't use the word contiguous, they use the word adjoining.
Adjoining is touching. In my language as a real estate broker, contiguous is a touching. Adjoining is not. That is actually not a professional sort of term that I've ever heard.
Yeah, but
So adjoining would mean touching.
Well, it seems
And so
pretty
contiguous. I'm sorry.
It seems pretty clear that what the code is saying is that the B1 zone is next to, in whatever sense, a residential zone, and that whichever that, it doesn't like free it to do whatever it wants if there's an alley in between.
Well, what if there was a football field in between? Is it still adjoining? Because that's a public use place. And I believe that if you look back in precedent, and I can get the dates and the times of decision making, that this has been decided in the past that a thoroughfare, whether it's a road, a highway, a park, does not create contiguous land to or adjoining land to a zone.
That may be the case, but it seems very clear that in this case, there is nothing like a football field separating the B1 zone from the R1 zone.
It's a 50-foot swath of East State Street and the alley. So that's not adjoining. If you look at the definition in the Webster's dictionary, that is adjoining doesn't mean it means touching.
I didn't choose it was the
but you're interpreting the code then. And I think you're interpreting it incorrectly.
Okay, so the question in my mind is, it seems very clear to me, as I interpret the code, that what they're talking about is that the B1 district, what kinds of residential uses are permitted will be based on the residential district that is next to it, closest to it, whatever. So so the question is, are you saying that because there's an alley or whatever, that means, what would that mean for the
It's mean it's
B1?
not contiguous and it's not adjoining.
So what would the residential uses permitted, what would the
It's not a
permitted
residential use and it shouldn't be driven by that. It's a
what?
business use zone and should comply with the business use situations.
Mr. Lender, Mr.
Yeah.
Lender, is
Yeah.
there a zoning for that alley besides B and A? Or
No, there is not. It's a
there's
public
not.
thoroughfare.
So when I guess I interpret the joining as one side is B and
And
one side
with
is R.
all due respect, I think your interpretation is wrong.
Well, that's just the
And
the way we interpret this. If
But
if that alley was zoned something else, then you say they were not
every
contiguous.
business building that's adjoining to an R1 would have to comply with the restrictions of an R1 zone. That is not fair and equitable. So you're making comparisons against business zones and business zones, not business zones and R1 zones, residential zones.
I think that
That's
your
the
interpretation
rudimentary issue. And the thoroughfare is the separation of that space.
I think your interpretation is very novel. And I would suggest that it is not within our purview to start claiming that because you read the code in the way that you do, that we need to ignore what we think is the clear.
I'm stating
No,
precedents.
please
I'm
let me
saying-
finish.
Right,
The clear intention of the code. I think that you might do well to approach city council and point out that you feel that requiring residences in B1 or in B1 zones to follow the restrictions or uses permitted in the adjoining zones. If you think that that's unreasonable, you should probably have them rewrite it or clarify it in some way.
I don't think that's not really the course of action in this sort of proceeding. It would be to challenge it, and it's not counsel that you challenge. It's a legal counsel. It's a legal counsel challenge, and I'm not threatening or anything else. I just think it's totally unfair. You can't be putting restrictions of a business zone based on an R1 zone residential. It's not fair, it's not equitable, and it's not right, and I don't believe it's legal.
It certainly has been the practice in this town.
No, it has not. I think the practice has not been always that case.
Well,
Maybe
Mr.
not
Lender,
always.
And I think there are exceptions, not exceptions, but I think there are rules that have proven differently.
I don't think we're going to resolve this issue tonight.
No, that's fine.
But
I think I'd like to speak in favor of this project because it is allowing for a mixed use application in a neighborhood that's both mixed use and diverse. And it not only complies, but it conforms to what's in its surroundings. And it's a good thing, and it's beneficial to the community. It is really what the Athens community should be standing for, is to both be fair, equitable, diverse, and meeting the needs of a diverse population. That's the mission of Athens, as far as I understand. And I apologize for being strong on this, but I am a real estate broker, and I think equity in both housing and business is one of the most critical and elemental things in any public community.
if I recall, you were the owner of this property before, right?
That's irrelevant. So,
No,
yes.
I know. My question is that.
And I don't even appreciate you mentioning that.
No, my question is that did you have any issues with running the business as it was, or did you want to move
No.
to somewhere else?
And I frankly studied this situation, and Mr. Mono and I never talked about it before we even had a discussion, but I have participated in construction projects in the city of Athens, in front of the zoning board numerous times over the last 30 years. I have, and again, had a precedent set in regards to this, the old Merchants Bank on Stimson Avenue, in which this discussion occurred because it butted against an R1 zone. And the argument was that we were not going to give a variance for that because you have to be compliant with a residential zone. The decision was made based on precedent that the alley, the 10-foot alley in this case, was not an adjoining property. It was a separation of the zones independent of any contiguous nature or adjoining parcel of land.
All right, thank you.
And I think I would really appreciate that maybe you look into that precedent.
Mr. Linder, does that continue on down that alley where KFC is, et cetera? Is that?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
Anyone else who would like to speak in favor of this proposal? Ryan, do we have
Yeah.
anyone?
John, there was somebody in the chat too. There's a comment in the chat from an attendee.
Could you please read it?
Let's see.
It's a general comment, though.
Just comment. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we have some letters in here. Lisa, you have the same list of the letters in the same order of the date, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll read the first one and you go to the second and we alternate. The first letter for the variance is from Kathy Estrali, and the Near East Side resident. The letter is dated May 14. After knowing Kurt and Teresa Montel for the last 10 years and witnessing the properties they have bought for themselves and as rentals, I am constantly impressed by the high quality they put into all of their properties. And then goes on the property they would like to upgrade on East Estate Street, known as the Larry Conrad Building, is another opportunity to keep Athens moving forward. The Montel family mentioned they would like to keep the current unique style of the building while upgrading it. I have been told they are hoping to invest in ADA accessible rentals there. This seems like an ideal location to do this. I could see someone with mobility issues benefiting from being close to Kindred Market. Next, Lisa.
So, okay, the next one that I have is for on 521 from Shelby Rhodes. Is that what you've got?
Yeah.
Okay, so he says, please know that I support the variance approval for case 2104V at 280 East State Street because I believe that the city of Athens desperately needs more housing, and in particular, ADA compliant, age-friendly, and wheelchair accessible housing. Thank you very much for your consideration. Mr. Shelby Rhodes, Executive Director, Havar Inc.
Okay, the next one is a letter from Mr. Larry Young, forwarded by Mr. Montel. And it says, to whom it may concern, as the adjoining property owner of 282, 284 East Estate Street, I fully support the issuance of all variances relative to case 21-4V. Montel LLC deserves the same rights afforded to other property owners, which includes myself in the B1 zone. Those rights include multi-unit residential use in a non-conforming building. The granting of the variance will not be detrimental to the area. In fact, it will help create much stronger community. This minimum variance is the least the city can provide a business owner navigating through these most unprecedented times. Please consider this a strong voice of support in your decision making. The next one I think is from Liz Paul. Do you have that, Liz? Lisa?
I do, but I have others that came in earlier, if that makes a difference. if we want to do them in order of date.
Okay, that's the way. Yeah, go ahead.
There's one from 523 and one from 525 and one from 526, all before Liz Paul's. So on the 23rd of May, there's a letter from Aaron Leatherwood. Do you have that?
No, I don't. You go ahead, read that one.
Okay.
That was the ninth one.
May 23rd, 2021, to the members of the Athens City Board of Zoning Appeals. I had planned to attend the last meeting via Zoom on May 11th, but was unable to do so because the Zoom link was not functioning. So I appreciate the BZA's decision to have a special meeting to provide people with the opportunity to provide input. I live at 271 East State Street, which is located directly across the street from the parking lot of 280 East State. When I heard about the planned redevelopment at 280 East State Street, my reaction was mixed, and I reached out to Kurt Montel to express my concerns. He has responded to these concerns by reducing the size of the proposed balconies and proposing green space along the front of the parking lot to visually shield the parking lot from the street. And I'm greatly appreciative of these changes as they are a significant improvement from the current situation. The property is zoned B1 and is currently used for professional office space. We've learned from the pandemic over the past year that working from home is an effective option for many professionals. So I'm not surprised that the demand for professional space in Athens is down, or that the owner is seeking to repurpose a portion of the space to another use. The property does not have the high ceilings on the first floor that would enable a conversion of the entire footprint to retail, as was done for Kindred Market, although it could potentially be divided into several smaller retail spaces. However, I would see a conversion of the less functional back portion of the building to a separate low-end retail/services use as highly undesirable due to the types of tenant that this square footage might attract. If we tell Mr. Montel that he's free to use the space for a lower value purpose, we shouldn't be surprised if he does so. It is my understanding that the BZA is attempting to consider several factors as they relate to the requested variance, and my input on these factors follows. 1, would denying the request for a variance create a practical difficulty or undue hardship, which is unnecessary to achieve a public purpose? Mr. Leatherwood answers, the property is currently used for a commercial B1 purpose. From the perspective of anyone driving along East State Street, maintaining commercial space at the front of the building ensures that it will retain the character of a commercial business. 2, exceptional circumstances that do not apply to other properties in the area. Mr. Leatherwood says, the current property is, quote, grandfathered to permit a parking lot lacking green space along East State Street, and this is unsightly. The requested variance will remediate this problem through the addition of a long row of small trees, low hedges, and/or pyramidal shrubs along the front of the parking lot, which would do a lot to improve the viewscape of the neighborhood. These circumstances are relatively unique. The only other business in this section of the street with a large unsightly parking lot is at Kindred Market. A variance which will have the effect of remediating this circumstance is a net gain for the community. Okay, now I've just lost. I don't have the rest of his letter, but I know that there's more. Does anyone have that? It seems to have been cut off in this version.
It was. It only stopped at 2 or whatever.
But it was in a previous. I could look that up. John, if you want to go on with other ones, I can try to locate the rest of this one.
Well, these letters are all actually on the website, and I think maybe if somebody's interested, they can go ahead and read it, because I don't have them.
I have a copy of the letter, and I have the second page of that. I can certainly read that for us.
Yes, please.
3, preservation of equal prop. This is a continuation of Mr. Leatherwood's May 23rd, 2021 letter, Aaron Leatherwood. Item number 3, preservation of equal property rights. Will a failure to grant the variance deprive the property of rights which other nearby B1 properties have? Similarly, will granting the variance give the property any special new privileges? He responded, Kindred Market is next door. It has a slightly smaller footprint and houses 12 people on the second floor. Similarly, the floral shop at the other end of the same B1 zone was redeveloped in the last few years to house a similar number of tenants. I don't see this as all that different. 4, minimum variance. Is this the minimum variance necessary? Will the proposed variance harm neighboring properties? He responded, the property is already grandfathered for nearly 100% lot coverage and almost no green space. The proposed variance brings other aspects of the property closer in line with city code by adding green space to the front of the property. 5, absence of detriment. He responded, it's always easy to imagine everything continuing as it is today, but things change. I'm aware that the BZA doesn't explicitly consider whether a property owner can earn an adequate return on his investment in deciding to grant a variance. However, we're at a point where the site would benefit from reinvestment. If the site doesn't receive reinvestment, it will stagnate, and this could accelerate a condition of urban blight. We accordingly need to seek a balance between approaches which balance the risk of future detriment from continuing as is against the risk of future detriment posed by the proposed variance. Living across the street, I can see these arguments from both sides. However, Kurt and Teresa Montel have been a blessing to the Near East Side. They did an outstanding renovation at 169 East State Street and built 2 quality new rentals at 12 and 16 South Shannon Street. They have also invested heavily in Elmwood Street. He is exactly the type of developer that we should be encouraging to make thoughtful investments in our neighborhood. Rather than seeing this as an opportunity to stop development, I am asking the BZA to see this as an opportunity to encourage this development and engage in a dialogue with Kurt Montel around how this can best be accomplished. Thanks in advance for your consideration, Aaron Leatherwood.
Thank you, sir. Lisa, I've got all my papers mixed up in here. So if you want to just go ahead and finish the 4s for the variances, and we'll do their concerns later. Are you there, Lisa?
She's muted.
I'm sorry. I'm not muted anymore. I'm looking for Jim Bloom. Oh, I'll just scroll down. So the next one that comes up, although I'm missing Jim Bloom's, is from Mark Chapman. Yeah, we return to Jim Bloom. So
I was gonna say, I got Jim Bloom's if you wanted me to read it after.
yeah, can you want to do that?
Sure. You want me to read it now?
Yeah, because
Yes.
it's the next by date.
Okay. This communication is in support of Kurt Montel LLC, TAM Construction variance request. I would like to put my support in writing for the current request for variances submitted by Montel LLC regarding the inclusion of 8 apartments and 2 commercial spaces. New apartment construction for rental availability in community neighborhoods has been demonstrated to be an important component to providing reasonable and obtainable housing choices for members of our community that are not prepared or capable at this time of purchasing real estate. Community-based rental choices offer professionals, graduate students, medical students, and incoming university staff to obtain a neighborhood choice as they enter our housing market. Traditionally, most apartment construction has catered to undergraduate needs in highly concentrated undergraduate locations. Additionally, the inclusion of 3 physically challenged apartments provide additional choices to those community members, as there are typically limited choices for that product. It is inevitable that due to the zoning configurations existing in the city of Athens, that occurrences of previously zoned B properties are adjacent to R1 neighborhoods. Our company developed the former Athens Flower Shop that was also a B zone adjacent to an R1 district. Madison Heights included 2 townhouses, 1 duplex, and 2 single-family building lots. Our experience has been that there is significant interest to reside in this location, and our rental core has been professional people, OU coaching staff, and graduate students. The Montel LLC development has adequate off-street parking, which also eliminates any concern about the use of on-street parking in the adjacent neighborhood. It is also my understanding that the subject building's footprint will not be altered. Finding the capacity to coordinate the intermingling of R1 and B districts is a challenge. Residential apartment development is a logical intermediary between these districts. Well-conceived and developed housing is critical to the ongoing development of the Athens community. Diversity of choice at different price points for those seeking rental options is critical and in need. Yes, this will be a neighbor to our previously developed property. And if our property serves as a roadmap to this need, approval of these needed variances makes sense to provide important housing choices. I offer my support and request the approval of all needed variances to move this development forward. Sincerely, Jim Blue.
Thank you, sir. Next one, Lisa.
Okay, I've got Mark Chapman, who wrote on the 26th, and he says, "Good afternoon. I'm sending this message to voice my support for the proposed variance and the project at 280 East State Street. As a resident and homeowner who has lived in the very direct vicinity of this building for the past 14 years, I think that the plans as described will bring strong improvements to our neighborhood and valuable investment within the Athens community. As such, I ask that you please allow the addition of the residential units to the building. I have looked through the plans and spoken to with the owner of the building, and I'm confident that the project will be done to the highest standards and will benefit many groups across our community. Thanks in advance, Mark Chapman." And next is Liz Paul. She wrote May 27th. "To whom it may concern, I am writing this letter in support of the Montel LLC apartment project to occur on 280 East State Street. This project will enhance our city by providing 7 ADA accessible apartment units." It's actually 3, right? But the Montel LLC company has purchased several houses in the Athens area for affordable rental housing, and they have done amazing exterior and interior work to these homes. All the work they do has improved our neighborhoods and provided excellent housing for renters. The Montel LLC company are respectful, upstanding Athens residents and take pride in their work. I couldn't support this project more. Please let me know if you have any questions. Best, Liz Paul on Sunnyside Drive. And then we heard Larry Young's, right?
Before you go to Larry Young, did you say something about 3 units or versus 7 units?
Well, the ADA compatible were 3, right? And she said
Right.
7.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's also a letter from Dan Stroh and Dave Hayden.
Yeah.
Which one came first? I don't know, Lisa. I just have.
They both came on the 28th, so it doesn't really matter.
I'll read one, you read the other.
Okay.
All right, I'll do Dan Stroh.
Okay.
LCR Realty Office property located at 280 East State Street into a mixed residential and commercial space. I've known Kurt personally and professionally for almost 10 years and thus am very familiar with the work he has done on properties in Athens in the past. I very willingly can attest that he does extremely high quality work with an eye to both the history of its space and its potential. Regarding the planned residential portion at 280 East State Street, the housing on the first floor would be ADA compliant and all the apartments would offer something in fairly limited supply within the city limits. High quality professional rental residences. For the plan designs, the footprint of the building would not expand and the height of the building would increase by a total of just 6 feet. The intention is also retain the Art Deco style of the current building, which is important for many. With Career Connections having moved out of the building, it's in need of a reimagining. The rear space is a hodgepodge of offices that would be difficult to rent to any business. Not approving this appeal would run the potential risk of resulting in an underutilized and potentially empty storefront along one of the main corridors through our town. Meanwhile, approval would help to support an interesting and growing area along East State Street with a Kindred Market, Athens Bread Company, and Village Bakery already in place. I'd also point out that as someone who lives on May Avenue, this is essentially in my backyard. I strongly encourage the committee to approve this request. Sincerely, Dan Stroh, 29 North May Avenue, Athens.
Okay. David Hayden, May 28th. To whom it concerns, I'm writing to express my support for the proposed development of the commercial property located at 280 East State Street and owned by Montel LLC. We've lived in the neighborhood for 16 years and have been very impressed by Kurt Montel's previous work. On South Shannon, he questions 14 South Shannon, I believe. He purchased a dilapidated eyesore and replaced it with 2 small, high-quality homes that were built to look as though they'd always been part of the neighborhood. When we first moved to Athens in 2005 with an infant daughter, we weren't ready to be homeowners. There was an abundance of student-oriented rentals, but there were very few suitable for young professionals and families. Homes like these on South Shannon, clean, updated, and situated away from the rowdier parts of town would have been ideal. The proposed apartments in the 280 East State Street building fill a similar niche and are in line with the idea of increasing housing density close in without disrupting the overall feel of the neighborhood. My understanding of the proposal is that it will reformat the current building so that it can provide efficient mixed use with little outwardly visible change to style or footprint. We've been excited that there are now a few high-quality businesses in the neighborhood, and we think that increasing housing density and diversity nearby will help them succeed. Kurt and Montel LLC have a reputation of doing very high-quality work and of being respectful to neighbors both during construction and in the long term. I've personally seen a small but significant example of that when Kurt purchased and remodeled his personal home at 9 South May. He meticulously restored it, retaining all of its historic character and truly improving the curb appeal of the entire street. At one point during the remodel, he decided to replace his driveway since it was in disrepair and drained poorly. But this is what was remarkable to me at the time. A good neighbor would check in with the owners next door, then proceed. But Kurt noticed that his next door neighbor's adjoining driveway was in worse shape, so he took it a step further and replaced theirs too. While in the short term, construction of 280 East State might prove a minor inconvenience to the immediate neighbors, I'm convinced that they and everyone in the neighborhood will benefit in the long run. Best, Dave Hayden, 9 North Shannon Avenue. And that's it for the pros, I think.
Okay, thank you. Thank you both for reading this letters
Did
and
we hear the
emails.
one? I'm sorry, did we hear the one from Larry Young?
I think someone did.
I think so.
Let me look again. Anstro, Jim Bloom, Larry Young. Yes, because that was the one where he said these most unprecedented times. So we did hear that.
Very good,
Yes.
thank you.
Okay, do we have anyone from the public online who would like to make a general comment? Please raise your hand.
There is a comment, a general comment that someone has posted to the chat.
Okay, I don't see the chat right now. Could you please read it?
Yeah, I can do that. She says, Beth Traggart or Traggart, 6 Marietta Avenue, Athens, Ohio. This comment isn't for or against, just a concern. With only a 5-foot setback from the alley, my concern is that the ADA apartment residents may have a safety issue getting in and out of their homes because their doors are so close to the alley. There is light but regular traffic on this alley. Thank you.
Okay, there was also another email. I guess the first one we received on, I think was the day after, May 12, maybe, from Mr. and Mrs. Deuce.
Yeah.
Do you have that email handy?
We also have a Jeff Deuce raising his hand as
Oh,
an
okay.
attendee that would like to speak.
Yeah, sure. Let's
That would be good.
hear that first.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll allow him to talk. I think their hand just went down, but I'm going to go ahead and allow them to talk anyway and see if they want to say anything. Jeff, if you could unmute yourself and let us know if you'd like to say anything, please.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Hi, Jeff.
Hi. So first of all, thanks very much for winding this back and allowing the public to participate in the process. I understand technology presents its own challenges, and I appreciate the fact that you noticed that problem in the previous hearing and we're willing to hold this again so that everyone can participate. So thanks for that. I also want to express my appreciation for the focus of the BZA on the statutory requirements in this case. That was my greatest concern. As I listened in to the previous discussion. I applaud the focus, especially on the exceptional circumstance issue. I didn't hear any discussion in the last hearing that would have identified and produced a finding that said there was an exceptional circumstance here that would qualify for the issuance of the variance. So I appreciate that focus here. The other item that has not come up in great detail in the conversation so far, and I'd appreciate hearing further discussion and ultimately welcome the findings of the BZA on this point, is with respect to minimum variance. You know, we're talking here about 8 apartment units. I understood from earlier in the discussion that these are 2-bedroom units. I appreciate Mr. Golsey's comment about these variances run with the property. I've been very impressed with Mr. Montal's demeanor in these discussions. I appreciate his track record in developing exceptional properties throughout the community. But the reality is, as you stated, Mr. Golsey, these variances run with the land, and Mr. Montal may or may not, and likely will not, own this property forever. If we have 8 2-bedroom apartments here that a future owner converts into student rentals, and there is nothing that I'm aware of that would prohibit a future owner from converting the rights that are granted with these variances into student rentals. We have 8 units that could conceivably house 4 people per unit, 6 people per unit. We could have a very substantial impact in the future on the adjacent property owners. And by the way, we are immediately adjacent, Jeff and Jill Dozy, at 281 East State Street. So that, I think, would be a major concern. You know, the biggest part of the change here in this property is the addition of that second floor containing 5 units. Minimum, from my perspective, may conceivably be authorization for the 3 units on the first floor, which would then not require expansion of the property with that second floor and the additional density that would go with it. But I would welcome and look forward to hearing the BZA's discussion on that point. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else who would like to make a general comment? Ryan, do you see anyone else?
No one's currently raising their hand or
Okay,
made a message in the chat.
Is there anyone online who would like to speak in opposition to this proposal?
No one is currently raising their
Okay,
hand. or
and
made
we
any
have,
messages.
to my knowledge, we have 2 emails, 1 letter, 1 email. So Lisa, you want to go one, and Joe would do the other one.
Where are they?
Sorry, they should be at the beginning of our packet, or
It was May 10, I believe. There was one by Deborah Crabtree.
yeah, I see a Cynthia Love. Okay, there's an updated one from Cynthia Love. Can I do that one, Cynthia? The updated from Cynthia Wallace Love.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I found the Deborah Crabtree, so that's
Okay.
fine. I'll do that one.
All right, so Cynthia Love, who wrote originally before the first meeting, or after, maybe after, but anyway.
No,
this
before, on May 8.
Before, yeah. So she has an updated version of the letter on May 25th, and I'll just read that one.
Okay.
Yeah, it says replaces May 8th letter. As a Patton Street resident, I request the appeal be denied for the variance from ACC 2310-01 for the rear setback of 280 East State Street. So she's not quite clear on what we're talking about, but I also request the appeal for the variance from ACC 230401 be denied for this property. The rear setback would not meet the requirements for the zoning in this area and therefore would not permit the units being proposed. Yeah, I see what she's getting at. I have lived in this neighborhood for 18 years and purchased this property on 3 Patton Street due to the residential zoning. Please deny this appeal so this community may remain as it was intended. Sincerely, Cynthia Wallace Love.
Okay, this is from Deborah Crabtree on Monday, May 10th. To whom it may concern, I'm writing this email on behalf of my 86-year-old mother, Catherine Crabtree, the property owner of 277 East State Street. She's not able to send the email herself, and I am also her power of attorney. These are her thoughts. Her father built the house at 277 East State Street, and Catherine Crabtree was raised in that house, and her granddaughter now lives there. This is a family neighborhood with mostly owner-occupied single-family housing, and Catherine does not want rental property renters encroaching. Kurt Monell bought the Larry Conrath building across the street, 280 East State Street, and wants to build several apartments and one business in that space. Mr. Monell is also buying a property in the Near East Side and turning those properties into rentals. That is very concerning. As stated before, this is mostly owner-occupied single-family housing in this neighborhood. If he wants to buy, build rentals, take it to a neighborhood where it is zoned for rentals, and don't turn the family neighborhood of the Near East Side into a lot of rentals. Catherine would like Kurt Monell's request for a variance denied. Thank you for your consideration in this matter. Deborah Crabtree. I am writing this email on behalf of my mother, Catherine Crabtree.
Okay, is that all we have? I think so.
There is that one from Laura Edge. I don't know if it's still relevant. Because it had to do with that easement, the AEP easement. And also, I think the appellant or his representative, or sorry, whichever, said that they had alleviated her concerns. So I don't know.
Yeah. Kurt said he spoke to her.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, the letter should be on the website.
Okay.
Okay, the appellants, now you can go ahead and respond to any of these letters if you like at this point.
Sure thing. Thank you. I would like Mr. Ducey to know that even though he lives across the way there, what he doesn't know, I guess, about the existing property, there actually is an existing second floor at 280 East State Street. It's hard to see, and it's one of the proposed apartments on our building layout, but it's not noticeable now, is what I wanted to point out in that regard, and to let him know that there is a second floor existing there. But the bigger question and the broader point I would like to make in regards to everyone in attendance today is, I guess my question is, in response to the letters, do we find the Kindred Market and the bread company property obtrusive? And the reason I ask that is because if you find that property obtrusive, then you probably find our proposal obtrusive. But what doesn't make any sense to me is I don't think anyone actually in this community finds the proposal obtrusive in regards to what we're presenting here today. I really think what people are objecting to is simply change. And what I'm asking the board today is what I perceive to be a minimum variance due to the site and due to the current situation that we are in. To create change. And I think change is inevitable. And in this case, it is very logical and it's a viable progression for 280 East State Street. Regarding the concern and the change of use from business to residential, what the B1 does provide, in my point of view from reading the code, is a stronger mechanism for enforcement of violations by the city. I would argue that having residential units in this business zone should provide the R1 neighbors with great assurance. In a B1 zone, and I quote, the use must be non-objectionable, and goes on to limit and or prohibit odor, noise, excessive waste. This provides the city with a mechanism to strongly regulate any issues. I believe that's all I have in that response, unless Trent, you have anything.
Oh, please do.
I do not believe I have anything.
Thank you.
Great.
Okay, thank you. We're going to close the discussions from the floor. And if you folks want to discuss among yourself, that's fine. Otherwise, who would like to make a motion?
I move. Oh, I move to grant a variance from ACC 23.10.01 to allow a front setback of 8 feet where 25 feet is required, rear setback of 5 feet where 30 feet is required, right setback of 4 inches where 8 feet is required, structural coverage of 40% where 30% is required. Total lot coverage is 91% where 60% is required, and a variance from ACC 23.04.01 to allow 8 units where 1 unit is permitted. Proposed work would provide 3 residential units and 1 business space for the first floor. Second floor would provide 5 residential units. Sorry, pollen, it's killing me.
Do we have a second?
Before I second it, can I just request that we add 3 ADA compliant residential units as opposed to simply 3 residential units?
John? You're amending his motion? Is that what you're doing?
Yes, John, is that okay with you?
John,
Yes.
you're muted. Okay, John agrees.
Then
Do we?
I'll second.
Okay, very good, very good. So let's go to, again, I'm going to read, according to Athens City Code Section 230710C, variances from the code shall not be granted unless the board makes a specific findings of fact based directly on the particular evidence presented to it that the standards and conditions imposed in this title, if applicable, have been met by the applicant. So, for example, we're going to go for the exceptional circumstances. If you find any exceptional circumstances to this property, then we discuss it. Exceptional circumstances. There are exceptional or extraordinary circumstances or conditions applying to the property in question or to the intended use of the property that do not apply generally to other properties or classes or uses in the same zone.
I think in terms of the setback and coverage variances being requested, that yes, we've heard how the site topography and the layout limit the usability of the site. And additionally, this whole property has been, with its current out of conformance things, has been grandfathered.
Any other comments from
Yes,
board members?
It already has a parking lot also. So the usability issue is pretty good with that.
And John, I would like to take another stab at what I tried to say last time we met regarding the mixed use variance. The code requires us to find whether the use, whether there's an intended use that does not in general apply to properties in the same zone. And I truly do believe you could argue that this restriction against multifamily dwellings in this case does not generally apply to all B1 zoned properties, specifically those that do not abut R1 or R2 zones.
Okay, anyone else? Let's go to practical difficulty and undue hardship. Because of exceptional or extraordinary circumstances or conditions pertaining to a specific piece of property, a literal enforcement of these regulations will result in practical difficulty or undue hardship that is unnecessary to the achievement of public purposes.
Again, when we look at the setback and coverage variances, the owner cannot make any substantive enhancements to the existing building without violating code requirements unless we grant the variance.
Okay. Anyone else? Preservation of equal property rights. Literal interpretation of these regulations would deprive the appellant of rights commonly enjoyed by others in the same zone and the same vicinity, while a granting of the requested variance will not confer on the applicant any special privilege that is denied to other properties in the same zone and the same vicinity. Okay, you're on the roll.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think we disagree, or I disagree with what you and Lisa have articulated on this issue. I think that it is relevant. However, it happened that Kindred Market and the Madison Heights development on the corner of Madison and East State do enjoy the variances that's relevant to this case. I know we disagree, but that's
Okay.
how I feel.
And I'd just like to go on the record that I agree with that perspective on this as well, even
Okay.
though I do not have a vote here tonight.
But you can discuss, you know, we definitely
Right.
can discuss here.
But I at least wanted to weigh in on that I agree with that assessment by Kay.
Okay.
I thought that Rob is voting tonight because he
No.
voted last time, no?
No, we have 5 members present, so we're just going to go with our policy.
I see.
Absence of detriment. The authorizing of such variance will not be of substantial detriment to adjacent property and will not materially impair the purpose of the zoning code or the public interest.
The building's already been used and the parking lot's been used. It's going up 6 feet, which wouldn't put undue pressure or shadows on anyone on either side of the street.
He
Okay.
met the concerns of the one over the AEP. So
And not of a general nature. The condition or situation of the specific piece of property or the intended use of the said property for which variance is sought, one or the other, or in combination, is not of so general or recurrent a nature as to make reasonably practicable the formulation of a general regulation for such conditions or situation.
I don't see that we're being asked to judge these kinds of variances often at all. This is the first I can remember.
Okay.
And John, I think you skipped number 5, absence of detriment.
I guess I did read that. Absence of detriment, the authorizing of such variance will not be substantial detriment to adjacent property and will not materially impair the purpose of the zoning code or the public interest. I think I read that.
Oh, really?
I think so.
What
Yeah.
did we say?
What do you want to say? Kay, maybe you want to say something.
I just wanted to point out that, you know, we've already talked about how there's adequate parking. Cars are going to exit onto East State and shouldn't be inconveniencing the abutting R1 neighborhood properties. And I also think that it's important to consider that this talks about not impairing the purposes of the zoning code, but sort of, I think it's fair to think about what about how it's going to actually honor the purposes of the zoning code, all the ways in which most of those letters that were written talk about the wonderful, high quality, very much needed housing stock, rental stock for professionals, non-students and the like. that needs to be recognized and is really important. And I know that Lisa and you understandably have talked a lot about how we're restricted as the Board of Zoning Appeals, highly restricted as we consider the 6 categories, but we're sort of in between what the, you know, however, whoever writes the code can do and how quickly they can act, and the needs of both businesses and homeowners who want to make improvements in their homes. And this is such an outstanding, in my view, and really different kind of project. I think it's better for us to err on the side of being a little too lenient in order to achieve the potential that this project has, which we don't often see to this extent.
It's all of our definitions as in what makes up a neighborhood. And, you know, there's already businesses there, right next door. And there's housing, and this is housing. Just because they're apartments doesn't mean that it's going to be bad.
Okay, any final thoughts before we vote? Are we ready to vote?
You're going to go not to a general nature? Or did
I read all of those, yeah. And then, so please unmute your microphones, the members, and then we start with in the alphabetical order. Ms. Carson?
I'm very sympathetic to all the points that have been raised, but I personally feel compelled to vote no. And I just want to add that I don't think that liking a project or thinking a project is of value is really up to us. I understand why some others feel that it is, but I feel that if we have so many problems with getting commercial properties in these places, we have housing issues, we have ADA housing issues, I think people should be lobbying city council to make the changes in code that are necessary. Otherwise, I think we're going to have a slew of people coming to us and saying, look, we've got a great project, do the right thing. So it does sound like a great project, and I nonetheless vote no.
Mr. Goodekanst?
I vote yes.
Mr. Cross?
I appreciate what Lisa is saying, but this is in front of us now, and I vote yes.
Okay. Ms. Townsley?
I vote yes.
Okay, we have 3 yeses, so I would no. So congratulations, you have 3-2 vote, and the variance is approved. And we don't have anything else really to discuss. So unless you have anything, I believe we have a regular meeting next week, next Tuesday. And I believe we have 1 case. And yeah, there's only 1 case that so we're gonna all meet again next week and do it again.
That's next Tuesday?
Next Tuesday. This is our regular meeting. And you already have received the packet. Is on the city's website. And so the meeting is adjourned.
Wait.
Good night. What?
Wait.
What?
Can I say something?
Yes.
I just want to say that I think it was sort of hard on everyone to have to redo this, and I appreciate, given that Mr. Montel and Mr. De Bruin got the votes last time, it must have been kind of an ordeal to come back and go through it again, and I appreciate their doing that.
And I also want to add that we tried to accommodate them as soon as possible, you know, and this was the first opportunity that we could hold the meeting. We didn't want to have any hardship on hearing the case. It is a process that we have to go through. We have to publicly inform and get the case going. So this was the earliest time. We could have waited till next week, but then we wanted to actually give you extra week before we get to the next one. So with that, we're going to close the meeting. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, Don.
Good night.
Good
Thanks,
night.
everyone.